Hey everybody, I'm Marcus Hazelwood, and welcome to Clear Haze Exchange. I'm an energy engineer with over 15 years of experience in sustainability and energy efficiency consulting. Many find these topics a little complex, so I created Clear Haze Exchange to help provide clear, actionable insight, clearing the haze, so to speak. We'll cover plenty of topics under the umbrella of energy efficiency and sustainability. Let's get into today's conversation. Michael, welcome to Clear Haze Exchange podcast. You have a big social media presence, YouTube channel, TikTok page, and you work as an architectural designer in Toronto. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, what initially, just diving right into it, what initially got you interested in architecture?
Man, it was a long process, and I think the biggest thing was the design thinking behind the education. I started off in computer engineering and very math and physics based, but I was missing that design creativity that wasn't really present in that first part of that education. And so when I spoke to my parents, hey, I really like buildings. I'm really gravitating towards civil engineering, but I'm missing that creativity and that design. They certainly pointed me towards architecture as saying, hey, you should try this. This is something that might be up your alley. So I took a few courses at my university and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I remember leaving the class one day and my mind was just laser focused on the assignment. And I knew, okay, yeah, this is something I could do and something I could fall in love with.
Yeah. So you study environmental design. So that aspect of architecture, what kind of how is that unique, and kind of describe what kind of the difference is there? Why are environmental incorporated?
Yeah, it was at a program at the University of British Columbia. And the whole aspect of combining environmental with design was a very much a sustainable approach. And it was really focused on making sure that when we are given these assignments, we're really paying attention to context and making sure we're choosing our design choices in an environmentally friendly way. So it was certainly my first foray into sustainable design, and it was something that continued certainly from environmental design into my Master's of Architecture program as well.
So what inspired your career path in architecture? You kind of gave context around how you got excited. And so after, as you get into school and you start to understand the basics around the schooling of it, what inspired you to kind of pursue a career in architecture, and how has that motivated how you've evolved through your studies and early professional experiences?
It was always exciting. It was every assignment I got, I wanted to attack it. It was something that I kept building a passion for. And even with all the hardships around the profession and the long, arduous path of trying to become an architect here in Canada, I still had a love and an interest in it. And I've always had a curiosity in architecture as well. So through my undergraduate degree, I really fell in love with it. My mentor told me you should go into a master's of architecture degree. I did that and I think it was 3 years of education. kept- I loved it then. And then I'm in pursuit currently of my full license as an architect, and I, I haven't tapped out yet. So yeah, I kept with it, and a lot of days it's really easy to wake up to and go to work because not only is it fun and interesting and I'm learning, but it's also that idea of designing for communities and for someone else. So that's where I think I take most of my joy and fulfillment from.
It's good, and can really sense it in how you describe it, that passion. So could you share a project that stands out to you in your experience on the professional side designing, an architectural journey where you felt you made a meaningful impact in the community and contributed to this journey of yours?
Ooh, I think the first project that I had coming out of school, my master's of architecture program into the uh, the workforce was a transit station in Vancouver. I'm originally from Vancouver, so being able to give back to that city on a through a public typology, I think that was fantastic. And being able to learn and be a sponge and just figure out the complexities of a building that big and that large and all the systems that had to come together for that project was eye-opening. And I think because that project was at such a complex level, it gave me the confidence to look at any other typology and say, I think I can do that. I think I can design that. But I think the importance of designing or giving, contributing to community in a way that the public is going to use this building and they're going to rely on it. I think that's first and foremost made this project uh, truly fulfilling.
Good. So diving into the creativity side, I know I mentioned you're an influencer in this space and trying to pull that passion to help people understand complex concepts around architecture. What I certainly appreciate about what you do is trying to really break down what seems to be complicated concepts in architecture, and especially around sustainability. So, how did you really become an architectural influencer, and what motivated you in that space?
Oh, it was a lot of things all at once. I think coming out of my master's of architecture program, you're really you're really entrenched in design and discussion and discourse, and you're constantly putting forth your opinions and expressing yourself and opening yourself up to critique. But when you enter the workforce, you enter the very technical side of things, and you're learning. You're at the bottom of the food chain, so you're getting tasks where you have to focus on the technical drawing side of things. And so I was really missing that from school. So that's one thing. And then I think also being able to have that creative ownership and accountability of creating something and offering it up for critique. And I think at heart, I like being a storyteller to some degree, and I like being able to listen and share stories. And I think this is my way of trying to tell these little stories about architecture so that people can appreciate it and see hopefully what I see when I look at buildings or ideas of sustainability and yeah, help and contribute to that online discourse, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So did that make you feel like you wanted to be a teacher in that influencer space, that you wanted to help people grasp this? So the teacher kind of um, aspect of being an influencer, explaining concepts, is that something that you desired? Was that something that you thought about before being a teacher?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think in another life, I probably would have gone through the teacher route, be a professor. I think maybe go back to school and do a PhD just to be a professor at a university. But that's certainly something I've thought about before. My dad was a math teacher, growing up, and the way he was able to explain math to me and these concepts so that I could understand, I certainly picked that up from him, and that's certainly something that I would probably do in another life.
So you emphasize constant learning in a lot of your videos, and the importance of that, and it's certainly a valuable thing. What areas of design or architecture are you currently most curious about or focused on developing and advocating for?
Ooh, advocating for it. I think that's two separate ideas for me personally. Like personally, I'm really interested in how materials and methods of construction come together to further my own career and my craft. So at work currently, I'm focused on envelope design and figuring out how pieces of a facade come together. Uh, for other people to advocate for, I would say that's a tough one. I would say maybe trying to demystify or make architecture more accessible to the public. So when architects, or people who are in architecture, when we explain buildings, it's always the final product that we show off. And it's never showing the process of getting to that final product. So there's this disconnect between the public and architects when they look at buildings. And I think just being able to see the process and see the constraints and the choices that designers make, I think that would go a long ways for people trying to understand architecture and what happens in this world.
One of the things that stood out to me in one of your videos was you mentioned R values
Yeah.
and how it's not talked about as much. For me, in my background in energy modeling, it is a very important piece to gathering the information needed to start then modeling or simulating the energy consumption of this building, the performance essentially of that design architecturally. And in the early stages, understanding the, this glazing, the envelope pieces, the R values are very critical piece. So if you could expand a little bit more on the importance of that, because I really think that's a good point that it's not talked about as much, but it's a very, very critical piece.
I remember that. That whole idea for that video came because in work from in my 9 to 5, I was working on envelope design. And in terms of that R value from a design standpoint, R value with installation usually increases the thickness of the envelope. So from a design standpoint, it's a really complex problem of how do you layer that envelope with the right installation, the correct R value that would propose, and then all the other fenestration, doors, materials, curbs, and trying to align that. So it's an incredibly difficult problem and one little aspect of a whole building. But making sure that your building is sustainable and it has that correct R value influences the design of the building. And so seeing that relationship, I think it's really important. I think people don't realize that, hey, when we're thinking about making this building sustainable, it causes these little design changes and it influences it can influence the aesthetic of the building, especially when you need to reach that correct R value.
That's good. And then it also kind of relates to that piece of looking at the whole assembly, thinking about that section, whether it's curtain wall or
Hmm.
something that is a full assembly, being able to consistently say that yes, this whole wall has this R value, which has that heat transfer is the same throughout the whole entire assembly. So then you start to get in down a rabbit hole of thermal bridging
Yeah.
and on all this on all these things. So how do you approach those in your space as a designer in when you're looking at balancing that kind of look perspective of how you want that finished product to look, like you mentioned. Um, but if you could get a little bit more context around that process, because it is important, and how do you communicate it with different design team members to ensure you're still getting there through the process?
Yeah, it is a long process and it's tricky at some points for architects and for me personally, what I found on projects is that we start just looking at the building holistically. Like we step back and we look at it and try to get the massing correct, the gesture correct. We're trying to get the overall spacing from say the property line to the envelope. We're making sure that at the big picture, everything's looking good. And then we take a closer look into partial plans, into sections to make sure that all our elements are lining up. And then today, even what we're doing is we're looking at the detailing of these things, and that certainly impacts the alignment of the envelope. We're thinking about thermal bridging. We're thinking about making sure that things are lining up correctly for structural. We're making sure that the spacing of a shaft can contain all of mechanical's requirements. We're making sure that ceiling panels are spaced correctly so that electrical has enough room between, say, a slab and a low hanging ceiling. So I would say that from the big picture, which architects really excel at, and then as we move down to the details, those details can really sway and correct or provide what's needed for those other systems with structural, electrical, or mechanical.
It's good. Yeah, I could, we could spend a lot of time
Oh yeah,
dissecting that.
it's so it can get
There's so
really
much
intense.
there.
Yes.
Yeah, 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 and that's why I think that with so many different, professions and industries, to be able to dive into one specific task or even a part of a larger process and to understand the intricate details is good to kind of appreciate different professions and from a perspective of sustainability. Sustainability is kind of broad general term that can go everywhere and fit everywhere. So it's always interesting to dig into the weeds of what someone like yourself is specifically doing to actually achieve that goal. So no, that's good. So how would you balance back to the topic of creativity? How would you balance the exploration with practical constraints in your design process?
Oh, it's like you said, it's a balance. When you're designing, you're always keeping those constraints in mind. And also constraints can actually help make a project more interesting. Um, it all depends on uh well, also, architects, I would say, would like more constraints because they act as a guideline too. You know what the boundary is, you know what you have to work with, and then you can work within that little piece. You can work with under that constraint that mechanical gives you. Hey, we need this amount of space in, say, a condenser yard. Or structural will say, hey, these columns need to be spaced 6,000 millimeters from center line to center line. Please do not do not design otherwise. So you work with that. So for example, if columns have to be spaced appropriately, then we as the architects would say, do you know what would look really good? If we align the mullions exactly with those columns and then everything is aligned, the geometry makes sense, they're relating to one another. So it forces us to adapt and to change, but it also can inspire us and help provide geometry to make a building really come together as well.
That's good. So So you have a popular YouTube channel, and in the videos, you make a lot of book recommendations for anyone interested in architecture. So with all these intricate details, and of course, this is your focus with your primary job working in the field, but how do you find the time to create and share on the social side? Is it because it's just ingrained in what you do every day, and it's just a passion, as you've obviously explained with your passion? So how do you find the time to creatively share all this socially?
Yeah, I don't have the time. Um, it's it's stuff that I've picked up on from school, from both undergrad and masters, from my workplace, and it helps that it's my everyday life. Like this is what I do for a living, and this is what I learn on the job. So it's almost like it's working together and it relates to each other. And because I find it so interesting and I'm so curious about it, I'd love to share it with other people as well, especially when I have these great conversations at the workplace or even with friends outside of work talking about, look at what this cool project is doing. Look how they, uh, detailed this ledge. Look how they detailed this corner. Like, check this out. And being able to share that with people online, I think it helps me enter that discourse and it also helps me stay current as well.
So how would you say reading about architecture, whether it's practical guides or philosophical reflections, how does that enhance a designer's creative process?
I think understanding, the whys of something can help interpret, some design moves because in architecture, things always have a function, but they also can have meaningful things associated with them as well. So if I'm looking at a detail and I'm trying to figure out why it's shaped a certain way, and it's from a book or from a catalog, and the designer or architect says, "Hey, this is why we designed it. This is why the form is shaped so," I can take the history of that detail, the history of those design choices, and see if they align with my project. It's very much, I always kind of compare it to cooking a recipe. Someone cooks a recipe a certain way because they like the ingredients a certain way. And then I can take that recipe and say, maybe I like that too. I'll try it. Maybe it doesn't work for me. Maybe I'll add a few things of my own. It's certainly this kind of interchange of ideas and making sure that my final product or my final design works for me too.
That's really good. It's something that I think about too. I think the recipe is a good example of that. When I think about if I was to take a recipe, for some reason, I'm always thinking it's like, okay, I see what the directions are, but let me try
Yeah.
this because in the past I've done this successfully, and to my taste, I like this. So I'm going to add a little bit more of this, or even add that. But I think that's a really good way of kind of explaining it. So in prior roles you've had, that you've worked, for several different, so you worked with affordable housing projects and you were a co-op student with an architectural firm. So did these roles help you narrow down what you wanted to do in that process?
Yes and no. I think the affordable housing project was one of my first projects that I was able to do. And because it was such a small scale and it was really simplified, the budget for affordable housing projects isn't a lot, so it's very reductive, but it helped me as a student understand systems and how things came together on a really small, simple scale. So that was an absolute a gift for me to really step into the architecture world. But trying affordable housing, I've tried multi-unit residential. I've been in a part of stadiums, a team working on stadiums, seniors facilities, and now transit architecture. I think I first wanted to try designing and working at these public typologies that were very complex because when you learn those systems, you gain that confidence. And if someday I decide, hey, do you want these large scale projects aren't for me? I can always kind of reduce the scope and move down to smaller and smaller typologies. I think trying to do the opposite, if you were to start on a residential project, a small house, and try to move into these big typologies like a transit station or a hospital, it'd be really difficult to learn all those systems. And it'd be a big investment of time and energy too. So being able to start at the biggest typology, some of the most complex typologies, understanding all the systems that go into it, all the planning, getting that experience, and then maybe if someday I get bored or I'm thinking of doing something else, I can always go down to a smaller typology.
I think it even for me, just the process of experiencing different areas, and I'm certainly an advocate for experiencing different areas of a specific area of study. Um, in the workforce, because then you may think that, or you may begin to understand that, okay, wow, this exposed me to X, Y, and Z, whereas this may not, or you're able to kind of gain more experiences that help you visualize and understand what you personally desire to do or what makes sense to you to pursue further with. And so that all that that context around that is always good, and what I like to share with people out of college or even going into college in their journey is getting an internship and doing something that exposes you to that real world, because like you noted, once you get into the workforce, it's a little bit more technical. Yeah, you can learn about things and kind of understand all the different concepts, take the test, and achieve that. I think it's really important, and I think that that makes a lot of sense on how you explain those different areas influencing the space that you're in now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like being able to experiment and see these other projects, see what they're about, see what the processes and workflow and what it takes to design, build, uh, collaborate on a house and then design, build, collaborate on a larger typology, being able to see all of that and seeing what you like, little things that you might want to focus on, it's invaluable.
Yeah. So, how's your experience with entrepreneurial ventures shaped your approach to working in architecture and design problem solving?
Ooh, ooh. I think having the courage to just step out into the unknown and try things and being able to take what you know, experiment, being unafraid of failing, and then taking all that um, confidence or workflow or processes that you've adapted to and taking that into architecture really helps because in this career, you're figuring out so much stuff and there isn't a manual for a lot of things. So you're constantly experimenting, you're constantly failing, you're constantly trying to figure things out. And so there's a lot of crossover between the two. There's a lot of how do we do this detail? How do we cap this slab off to make sure that there's no penetration from rain? How do we make sure that this thermal line on the wall it doesn't break anywhere important? Like it's you can't really copy paste and turn your brain off. It's a lot of figuring things out and just there's no one to say, hey, how do I do this? It's figure it out, see what you can come up with.
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot to from an entrepreneurial standpoint when you're wearing the different hats or individually. Like you said, you have to figure it out. And if you have an idea that you're passionate enough about, you'll research it with the help of AI. It helps a
Yeah,
lot with your
definitely.
research, um, but I think that's certainly an important piece to include that perspective and also that drive. I think working with people in the field of as a design professional, you often find people that you can sense the passion in it to where they can take something and when they'll go figure it out on their own time and come back versus someone who's just in there to just kind of progress the day
Yeah.
and then finish. So I think it's a huge impact on your colleagues. And you can often see, I don't know if you have had any experiences in that space of seeing where that passion meets the support as a team.
Yeah. I mean, you need both. When you work on like large scale projects or these big public typologies, your team is big and it's diverse. So you'll have people who love going into the unknown, figuring things out, coming back with solutions that they're excited with. You have people who just want to do their 9 to 5, but they do it incredibly well. They're incredibly disciplined, incredibly organized. And then you have, the people in between who floats on either side of it. So you need a diverse group of people. You need those people who are organized, who stop work at 5 o'clock and go home and turn it off. And you need those people who take their work home with them and just want to develop the project further because they're just excited about it. Right? You can't you need they both work hand in hand, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good. I like the way that you explain that. So working with the city of Vancouver, like you had mentioned, has offered insight into the municipal processes. How has that experience influenced your perspective on urban development and public architecture?
I remember that summer job. This was before architecture. I was a laborer and I was the one cleaning up parks. I was the one cutting the grass at parks. So I had this very intimate knowledge of where all the parks were in Vancouver. And I would drive there with my team and we would cut the grass. We would clean up the park. But having that knowledge of where all these greenery or these green locations were that were manicured and taken care of and realizing how much public space was really intertwined within the urban fabric of Vancouver, like gave me a really good example of what's the importance of greenery in cities. And so knowing that and being in Toronto now and seeing not as much dense greenery in the city, I can see the difference and see how spaces really cultivate kind of public gathering. They really create good spaces for people to take mental health breaks from work, and the importance of like, for example, tree canopies in streets and cooling effects and the ambient lowering ambient heat and appreciating how municipalities that focus on that greenery really help cities become desirable places to live.
That's good. The what I relate to with that thought is, so I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I moved to Boston, Massachusetts in 2014. So being born and raised in Midwest part of the US, I wasn't exposed to a lot of that type of development or the more progressive type of urban development within a city. So it was able to expose me to that. And when I got there, um, it didn't make sense to drive a lot because there wasn't, parking cost a lot, or I didn't want to get a, ticket here and there. So there was a lot of bike lanes and there was a lot of walking. And the perspective that it gave me was walking around the area I was working in or the city gave me so much more understanding of really what's going on, where the streets gave me helped me appreciate different areas. So then when I would drive in the same areas, I would know those areas more
Oh yeah.
intimately just because I them and could interact more closely. So I certainly see how that makes sense from my own experience because it's a lot to take in.
Absolutely. Designing the pedestrian experience, designing the biker's experience, designing the car experience, and trying to balance all those together certainly creates really interesting streetscapes.
Yeah, that was good. I rode my bike to work. Often I was on Harvard University's campus, and that's where I would ride my bike in because I worked on campus, and I would ride every day, and then I would ride my bike across campus to
Mhm.
meetings, and there were different projects we would work on that would focus on that and the architectural piece of that, and involving the bike lanes. And from a municipality standpoint, although there are some challenging things, there was accidents, and people had to get used to people riding next to cars. So there's certainly a safety aspect to it too. Um, but it's just it's amazing to when it's successfully done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a walker here in Toronto. I don't own a vehicle, so I very much rely on transit and being able to walk and discover places and just see what is happening on the street level in that regard. Just the ability to run into things and see ideas fused in that way is, I love it. So I'm not sure if I'll try and get back to a vehicle anytime soon.
Yeah, they're missing out on so much, right?
Yeah.
So, in your experience, what are some of the benefits and challenges of working within interdisciplinary teams, which we touched on a little bit, especially on the public or community focused projects, to where you're having stakeholders from the city or people outside of your architectural team or people with perspectives that don't understand really the process you're going through. So what are some of the benefits and challenges in working environments with different stakeholders?
I would say some of the benefits is that you're getting perspectives from different people. Sometimes we as architects, we like to focus on the aesthetic or what looks good, but we always have to consider who we're designing for and who this project inevitably will be for. And I think some of the challenges is budget is always a challenge, and when that comes into play, it's always a question of what gets cut. There's always a conversation about value engineering. We can remove this. We don't need this. We strip down the design until it's bare bones and it's a shade of maybe what the architects or designers proposed in the first place. But At the end of the day, I think what I've learned is when all these interdisciplinary opinions or perspectives are in a really good place and it's a win-win situation for everyone, the design usually ends up being really, really good. And when you've got clients or engineers that dig their heels in and don't want to play ball, then it's a nightmare and things, it's, it's a hard place to work.
What about the process of getting areas approved? So, say you have a big development and you need public approval or public input, whether it's a board or it's a public project. What does that process look like of convincing of the public that something is really going to look good, although this may be a challenge, or you may have this issue with bike lanes or whatever it may be? Have you had any situations where the community has been a challenge to navigate through, and how do you kind of advocate for that end goal of what your vision is?
I mean, so far I've been blessed on multiple projects that the community hasn't really fought back on any of the designs. At the end of the day, it is what the client wants and what the client can afford. Like first and foremost, we design, they are our boss. They are who we design for. And it's ultimately up to them to take public opinion into account or to just completely ignore them. But uh, one project I was on, uh, the client was proposing or they offered to do a fire station, and there was a really good integration of public opinion. And we, as the designers, when we were proposing the design, we were able to include a lot of what the public kind of the aesthetics and the scale of the building. I remember was a hot topic, and we were able to include a lot of that into our design, and the client seemed to enjoy it. So far, I've been a part of really good projects that have not been so detrimental to the public. Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers that, that it'll always be like that, but I know it won't.
I think a lot of the advocacy piece and informing people about different concepts, why they're important, the reasons why they would bring value to a community, as you're doing, in whether it's through your YouTube channel or your TikTok, you're exposing concepts and to help people digest that better. And I think that helps in a way, because people then, when they do see projects in their own community, they may have been informed about a certain area of why bike biking lanes, what that adds,
Yeah.
how it's cool. So all these type of things, and certainly I'm an advocate for it too, is helping people understand the values of these things and why they're talked about. It's not just sustainability. That word isn't just something where you're trying to save an environment. There's a lot of value behind that if it's thought about correctly, and
Mhm.
of course, in your case, designed to be sustainable. A lot of very, very critical points you touched on in some of your videos that are that kind of bring light to these subjects and these topics.
Yeah, I agree. I think allowing the public or giving the public access to, hey, these are the constraints that the architect went through, that the engineers had to deal with, and this is why project or development looks the way it does. I think just giving that information to them is beneficial, and they understand why something will look the way it does, why it's been developed the way it does. And yeah, I think it's valuable information that designers should include in their work sometimes.
So looking ahead, what kind of projects or roles are you most excited to take on as you continue your path in architecture? Do you like staying in the weeds of the technical side? I know you like getting into sharing your experiences, teaching this knowledge. So looking ahead, what you're most excited about venturing towards?
Uh, this is a tough one because for me, I'm still quite young in the profession. My mentor called me a puppy the other day, so I'm fairly new, and architecture is a long, long career. Like I'm quite young. I don't have my full license yet, so that's something I'm working towards, being able to call myself a fully licensed architect and being able to take responsibility and accountability for a design that I will put out. I think that's first and foremost my first step. And then after that, I'm really enjoying working on public typologies. Being able to contribute to community on that level, on that large scale level is incredibly fulfilling. And then with my content, I think continuing to really refine my niche and promote sustainability and just showcase the world of architecture. And I think allowing that endeavor to become my output for maybe being an educator. I'm starting to fall in love with that idea. So I'm in a really good place right now, and there's a lot of opportunity. And I think I'm just riding it out currently before making any type of career altering decision.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. As you grow in your career, you kind of gain more perspective, and that also
Oh,
influences where you
absolutely. Yeah.
go. Because a hard question to, pinpoint because we grow as you gain knowledge, more wisdom, and about all these things, and you develop more passions. They take you different ways, but the one thing you know for sure though, which is good, is that your knowledge that you're building in this space of architecture, which adds value, and then how you move with that your
Yeah.
journey.
Self-reliance in architecture and allowing that to kind of permeate the rest of my life has been incredibly rewarding so far. So it's something I'm incredibly thankful for.
Great. So, what do you believe are the most important qualities for an architect who wants to lead with empathy and purpose?
Hmm. Oh geez, I think I would say, well, for me, it's always, I always ask myself how I'm contributing to community. So it's not so much thinking about it in terms of this particular project is going to contribute to this municipality, but it's also, the community maybe online, maybe it's your community at your workplace. And once you really understand uh, the different ways that you can contribute, I think you start to develop empathy. You start to foster relationships. It's very easy to go to the workplace, your community where you're working with your friends and you understand where they're coming from and what you can learn from them and what they can learn from you. So for me, it's always a question about how can I contribute to community? And then from that, I think I've been able to develop skills of empathy, of understanding, and hopefully this fosters, the leadership abilities that I'm kind of developing in this career path.
And how would you role the importance of communication in this whole process? I think the reason I asked this question is because there's a lot of ways, in my experience, both as design professional communicating with clients, and you mentioned a lot of key points is listening to them. But how critical would you say it is for someone coming out of going to school for architecture and going into the industry? How critical and what would you tell someone in their early career about communication and all these things that they may not have been exposed to yet?
Communication is incredibly important. I think the biggest difference between being in the architectural world of the workforce as opposed to, say, someone who is starting off in school is that when you're in school, you are very much by yourself and you are designing for yourself. And when you communicate your ideas to the professor or to architectural critics who are at your crit or your pinup, um, they're evaluating you and putting value on your project. This is a good design. This is a bad design. This is, they're critical. They are offering criticism. Hopefully it's constructive, but you have to have that ability to, communicate and to not take it personally, I would say. because as you progress through school, you're going to have more projects that are group projects. But when you get into the workforce, it's no longer that you're designing for yourself. You're designing for a client. You're designing for someone else. And you're also designing with other people, with engineers, with clients, with public interest, and being able to communicate your idea, but also hear communication from other people is really, really important because at the end of the day, this is, a project where people collaborate on, and your ability to collaborate depends on your ability to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Just to kind of close out, I really think that is a really good point that you make. The other the other piece around to that that it makes me think about is understanding where you're going and not being so focused on trying to get there, but enjoying the process there. And the part of communication that it relates to is if you're so focused and overseeing on something that you're trying to go after, you're missing some of the pieces in between, and you're not able to communicate the different intricate pieces and parts needed to actually get where you're going. So that's where I'm a real big on communication and understanding what people are thinking, where they're at, what they're trying to understand. If they don't understand it, what is the barriers that we can help clear up so that we can get there. But with that said, I really again appreciate your time and I appreciate all the things that you're doing that you're sharing here, both on this podcast and on your YouTube platform and TikTok. But Michael, thank you for helping clear the haze about using media content to educate others in architectural design.
Thanks for having me. It was an awesome conversation.
Thanks for listening to Clear Haze Exchange. New episodes drop every 2 weeks. You can catch Clear Haze Exchange on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and more. Let's clear the haze about sustainability and energy efficiency together. Subscribe now and join the conversation.